first player we're going to be talking about today that's going to win you your fantasy football leagues in 2023 fantasy football is Ja'Marr Chase. Ja'Marr Chase, Cincinnati Bengal. You know me, Cincinnati Bengal fan over here. Ja'Marr Chase, absolutely elite level prospect coming out of LSU. A lot of people were worried about drops in the preseason. Proved those doubters wrong in his rookie season. And a lot of people have been comparing, saying Ja'Marr Chase. Now, it's pretty clear based on the first 2-3 seasons of Justin Jefferson's career that Justin Jefferson is by far the more superior wide receiver. But the advantage that Ja'Marr Chase has over Justin Jefferson is the fact that he has a higher touchdown upside. If we look at the last 2 seasons, 13 total touchdowns in his rookie season, 9 total touchdowns last season, and has been a top 5 wide receiver on a points per game basis the last 2 seasons. Now, a lot of you are saying, Caleb, right now, I have to draft Justin Jefferson. Right now, you're saying, Caleb, I have to draft Ja'Marr Chase over Cooper Kupp, over Tyreek Hill, but yet he's kind of fallen behind them in points per game in the last 2 seasons. Why do you think Ja'Marr Chase is going to take that next step? I just think the Cincinnati Bengals offense is finally going to take that next step. If we've looked over the last 2 seasons, T. Higgins has been out for a few games each and every season, which is not a big deal, but it is a big deal comparatively when you're talking about when that happens. All of a sudden, the defense has to key in on Ja'Marr Chase even that much more. And so if that Bengals offense can take that next step in efficiency, we finally have a healthy offensive line for most of the season. It's exciting. It is exciting for us Cincinnati Bengals fans, but it's also exciting for Ja'Marr Chase. And where do we think he can really expand on his game? The last few seasons, 134 targets last season, the year before that, 128 targets, which 134 targets to put up wide receiver 4 points per game numbers is insane. When you're talking about Cooper Kupp, who was on pace last year to do like 165, 170, the year before that, where he had his amazing season, 188 targets. If Ja'Marr Chase can even get 145 targets, which is 10 more than what he had this last season, then all of a sudden we're talking about Ja'Marr Chase as this ultimate level wide receiver who we could easily see finishing as the wide receiver 2, wide receiver 1. And so that's why I think Ja'Marr Chase could easily win you your fantasy football league in 2023 fantasy football. Now, my second player that I think could win you your 2023 fantasy football championship, bragging to your friends. Your friends are not going to draft him this high because they're going to be a little bit worried. It's going to be Bijan Robinson. Bijan Robinson, top 10 prospect, drafted to the Atlanta Falcons. And man, oh man, is Bijan Robinson good. You know, we gotta get some party noise over here for Bijan Robinson, because Bijan Robinson is what we all were bragging and hoping for with Saquon Barkley, where he had that amazing rookie season. And now all of a sudden we get to do it again in the fantasy football community. We get to do it again with Bijan Robinson. And yet you're feeling a little bit worried because you say, I think I'd rather take another running back instead of him. Like, yes, 100%. You should be drafting CMC. You should be drafting Austin Eckler. And if you haven't watched my RB rankings, go do that, because I have those guys ahead of Bijan Robinson. But when you're getting Bijan Robinson between pick 6 and pick 9, Bijan Robinson is a value because he just went to the Atlanta Falcons, who ran the ball the second most times last season. And what does that mean for Bijan Robinson? That means they are going to use him as an absolute workhorse. And by using him as an absolute workhorse, that is going to mean more touches for Bijan Robinson, more fantasy points. And when you're talking about a guy who is a 4.46 40-yard dash, all the athletic comparables that you want, and 21 years old, fresh legs coming to the NFL with an offensive line and a coach, Arthur Smith, who when he was with the Tennessee Titans, he knows how to use an amazing running back. He was a bell cow. And let's be clear, Desmond Ridder has to be better than Marcus Mariota, so the box will not be as stacked as it was last season. Bijan Robinson is my second must draft, will win you your fantasy football leagues in 2023. My third player who's going to win you your fantasy football leagues in 2023 fantasy football is going to be Garrett Wilson. If you didn't watch my video that I put out maybe 2 weeks ago, I talked about Garrett Wilson as a guy who has wide receiver 1 overall upside potential. Now, people laughed at it. They said, Caleb, there's no way that Garrett Wilson has that type of potential, be the wide receiver 1. And for me, I think Garrett Wilson is coming for the dynasty wide receiver 1 throne. And I think by this time next season, we're going to be like, wow, I should have drafted Garrett Wilson a little bit higher. And the reason for that really comes down to, if you look at his splits between Mike White and when he was with Zach Wilson, I mean, it is night and day. I will post a screenshot right here of those splits just so that you guys have them. It's a night and day difference in his points per game and his receptions. We're talking about all of a sudden he's jumping to 10, 11 receptions a game. If he's able to do that in a few game stretch with Mike White, why can't he do that for a full season with Aaron Rodgers, who Aaron Rodgers, as much as you might say loves to divvy the ball out, he does like his top guy, and his top guy when he was with Green Bay was Davante Adams. And we all know Davante Adams had a wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 overall finishes in points per game when he was playing with Aaron Rodgers. So there's no reason to me to think that Garrett Wilson, as a guy who last season had 147 targets, and yes, only had 83 receptions, But if he can even get 147 targets again and have a better catch rate, we're talking about a guy who could get in that 100 to 110 reception mark. We're talking about crazy fantasy football production from Garrett Wilson. And right now, at the early part of the second round, you're having to decide really between like Garrett Wilson and AJ Brown, which I think is like not even a question. I'm taking Garrett Wilson over a guy who has to fight for targets between him and Devontae Smith. So I love me some Garrett Wilson as my third must draft player in fantasy football for 2023. My fourth must draft, will win you your fantasy football league in 2023 player is going to be Calvin Ridley. Now with Calvin Ridley, the thing that we need to realize, he was suspended this last season, but I made a video talking about finding the next Cooper Kupp. Who was going to be the Cooper Kupp of 2023 fantasy football? It can't be Cooper Kupp because Cooper Kupp already is broken out. For me, it was looking at a guy being drafted in that 3rd to 4th round of your redraft leagues, a guy who's shown consistent touchdowns and a guy who got a major upgrade at quarterback. All signs point to Calvin Ridley taking that next jump. And the thing is, we have to remember with Calvin Ridley, he does have elite level wide receiver upside. With Calvin Ridley right here, if we look back in 2020, wide receiver 4 on a points per game basis, getting the ball thrown to him by noodle arm Matt Ryan. Now, Matt Ryan, as much as his end in the Falcons with the Colts was a little bit depressing, he still put up very solid fantasy football numbers with Matt Ryan in the 15 games that he played with 143 targets. Now, add him to an offense that is thriving with a great running game with Travis Etienne, Tank Bigsby. You have a great passing attack with Trevor Lawrence, who I think is going to take the next step. You have Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram. They cannot, you literally cannot double Calvin Ridley because he's going to be that good. And if you put someone over the top, of course they're going to throw the other way. And that's everyone's argument right now in fantasy football. There's just too many mouths to feed in this Jacksonville Jaguars offense. When you have the most elite level wide receiver, I want that piece of the offense, and that's going to be Calvin Ridley. Yes, imagine, we saw what happened with Christian Kirk when he entered this offense last season. Imagine what that's going to happen with Calvin Ridley in 2023 fantasy football. My fifth and final player that's going to win you your fantasy football leagues in 2023 fantasy football is going to be TJ Hockenson. It's no surprise. TJ Hockenson, we've been talking about it. First round drafted pedigree tight end, gets traded to one of the most pass happy teams from the Lions to the Minnesota Vikings. And the thing that excites me the most, of course, we can see on player profile, the most comparable player is Travis Kelce. But if we look at what he did last season, tight end for 12.7 fantasy points per game with 6 total touchdowns, 86 receptions, 129 targets. 129 targets as you're in your tight end spot. Wow, that feels great. If we look at what happened to TJ Hockenson once he got traded from the Lions to the Minnesota Vikings here in week 12, all of a sudden we're talking about a guy, 15.3 fantasy points per game, 11.7, 8.3, 35.9, 12.9, 22.9, elite level tight end numbers that you're getting in your tight end spot. And so a lot of people are discounting TJ Hockenson right now just based on the fact that they're comparing his whole season last season, which was great. But when he moved to the Minnesota Vikings, amazing thing happened. Now, a lot of people are going to say, well, Jordan Addison's going to be the wide receiver 2, the second receiving option to JJ. But if Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison are on the sides, the middle is going to be absolutely wide open, which is going to be great for TJ Hockenson with Kirk Cousins, who absolutely loves to throw the ball to his tight ends. And that's what makes me excited about TJ Hockenson, and that's why I think he's a must-draft player. Right now, when you're looking currently like an underdog in ADP, yes, he's going in the 3rd round. That is where TJ Hockenson's going. But the fact of the matter is, you could make the argument that Mark Andrews and TJ Hockenson are their own tier in tight end rankings, which they are for me. I haven't put out my tight end rankings yet, so make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, so you will get those rankings when I put them out. We're going to be doing a lot more mock drafts as we get into the NFL football season. So like I said, make sure you have that noti bell on. Make sure you follow me on Twitter so that you know when we are going live so you can join those mock drafts with me. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm super excited for fantasy football season. We're almost there, boys. Let's go. Peace.